We're ready to start. We're going to mute everyone at this time. And our panel will speak for about an hour, and then we'll have 15 minutes for questions. Please type your questions into chat at any time, and they will be asked at the end. This program will be recorded, and a link will be available on the AAUW Longmont website. International Women's Day, marked annually on March 8th, is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. Significant activity is witnessed worldwide as groups come together to celebrate women's achievements or rally for women's equality. AAUW Longmont is proud to bring you this panel discussion in partnership with the Women's Collaborative of Boulder County. Let me tell you a little about us. AAUW's mission is advancing gender equity through research, education, and advocacy. Our focus includes removing bias from education, fighting for fair pay and economic equity, and advancing women in leadership. The Women's Collaborative is a community of Boulder County organizations and individuals who come together to gain support and knowledge in order to amplify our collective voices in a way that improves the lives of women and girls. These 15 local organizations are members of the Women's Collaborative. They share common goals, but focus on various pieces of the larger equity issue. This day that we are celebrating also marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. The theme for International Women's Day 2022 is Break the Bias. Please check the chat for links to AAUW Longmont Women's Collaborative and the International Women's Day. And at this time, will the speakers please unmute themselves, and everyone else will stay muted. We welcome our panel members, Colorado legislators who represent Boulder County. Senator Sonia Jaquez Lewis from District 17, Representative Karen McCormick from District 11, and Representative Tracy Burnett from District 12. We'll ask a series of questions, and the panelists will each have an opportunity to answer in a rotating order. So will each of you please tell us in 1 or 2 sentences, what does breaking the bias mean to you? Sonia, would you start us off, please?
Sure. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, everyone. Sonia Jaquez Lewis. I represent Longmont, Lafayette, and Louisville for now. Redistricting will change that. But I am so happy to be here tonight. I've been celebrating International Women's Day for many years. Let me give you what Breaking the Bias, our 2022 theme, means to me. Imagine a gender equal world, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and a world where difference is valued and celebrated.
Thank you. Karen?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. And thanks for facilitating, Bev, and thanks for the invitation, Darcy. I appreciate participating tonight. I think for me, breaking the bias means that we have to recognize that each of us carries conscious and unconscious bias, both in the minds of men and women. And we have to work really hard to first recognize our biases, bring them to our awareness, our consciousness, and that's the first step for us to be able to question them, shine a light on those biases, and then begin to eliminate them. You know, we have been conditioned so long in our society to recognize certain types of people in leadership roles, and we find that sometimes the person we imagine that's the normal. We need to really think differently and imagine all kinds of people in all kinds of of leadership roles, so that once we visualize it, it'll come to pass. So that's what it means to me.
Thank you.
And-
Tracy?
Yeah, hi, and thank you again for having me tonight. Thank you, Darcy. Thank you, everybody. I'm Tracy Burnett. I represent Longmont and Lafayette and Louisville. And I'm going to be a little bit more specific because this immediately came to mind when I was thinking about this question. I think when we no longer have to prove ourselves and prepare and over-prepare just to be at the table or to lead a discussion. You know, in my career in technology, that there's so many times I over prepared for meeting, and then people turn to me for the answers to the questions because I was over prepared, and then they'd accuse me of being too domineering. It's like, can we, you know, so to me, getting over that and just being at the table and not having to prove yourself to be at the table and to speak at the table would be wonderful.
Thank you. So what barriers have you had to overcome as a woman legislator, and what barriers do you still face? We'll start with Karen.
Oh, great. So I brought up what it meant to breaking the bias meant to me before, because overcoming as a woman legislator was indeed breaking that mold of what you expect a person to be voted into office might look like. Now we're much better about that here in Colorado, but that's part of it. Is sometimes you just don't look the part, or you're not coming from a background that fits. Interestingly enough, when I first ran for Congress 4 years ago, I also signed up to take voice coaching lessons. And I did that knowing that sometimes we have to project our voice in a way that takes up more space in the room, that we have to learn to stand tall and own what we have to say, and not let others make us feel small in a room. So that's part of what I do. I am chair of a committee, and many times I have male individuals come suggest things to me as a way to do things. And I have to be very measured in what I say back to them when I get these suggestions, because I don't believe they would make these suggestions if I was male presenting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think I'm next, so I'll just jump in here.
Yes.
You know, I said I have always worked in a male-dominated field in high technology and in construction and things like that. And so I'd have to say I overcame a lot of barriers. I kind of have all the scars. You know, I hit the glass ceiling, I broke through it. I mean, and so yes, there's barriers at the state capitol, but to me, they're kind of molehills compared to the mountains I've already done over my life. So what I see is there was one committee I'm on that I was the first female on the committee, and it took a while for me to be recognized when I wanted to speak. It's much easier when you're in the committee and you have a microphone and everybody can see you. I found it's the less formal settings when I'm out on a field trip or something like that, where I really have to fight sometimes to get to ask questions or to have my voice heard. I also know it's much, much more difficult for women of color. And this is a frustration that I think many of our sisters of color feel. So still have a ways to go, that's for sure.
And Sonia?
Yes, thank you. You know, this is a fascinating question, because you would think after only 3 years, 2 years really, becoming a state senator, it's like, well, what kind of barriers could I have? Oh my gosh, there's so many. You know, I'm a pharmacist by training, big advocate of higher education. I'm an adjunct professor, published author. International published author. I've traveled all over the world. And do you know, even to this session, so this is my 4th session, I had a colleague, a male colleague, decide to run a pharmacy bill. It's directly related to pharmacy. He did not even come to me to ask my opinion about it. The bill is full of problems, full of issues. To me, it's like, could he have done it as an oversight? Sure. Do I think that there is a subconscious, I don't need to go talk to Senator Hawkes Lewis because she's a pharmacist? Who knows? But leadership in the Senate is still predominantly male. And that really controls who's on what committees, who runs what bills, who is able to affect the budget. So we see it every day. And huge shout out to Karen for becoming a chair, in her first session. That is a big deal. Now I'm vice chair on 3 different committees. And does that get me in the door? Sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's something that we are aware of as women in the Capitol. And one other note, if you don't mind, I serve in 3 caucuses. I'm the first Latina ever elected from Boulder County to the Capitol, and the first LGBTQ House rep and now senator from Boulder County. That's wonderful, and I love representing my communities. The third one is women. All 3 of us belong to the Women's Caucus, but it's also an added responsibility because I need to make sure I'm representing all of those communities, and we carry that as women. We take on so much, and while I'm very grateful to be a part of those caucuses, it's a lot of work. And, we're proud to do it, but it's a lot.
Thank you all. Many of the systems and structures that need to be changed to ensure equity for everyone in the community require creating legislation that will break bias. Please share one piece of legislation that you have introduced or worked on that breaks bias. Tracy, do you want to start us?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm glad you asked this question because I've asked this question of also people who are of color, like, how can I help you? I'm a white woman, what can I do? And it's going to, a lot of the answers I've gotten repeatedly is go to the root causes for those inequalities. For those inequities. And so it's things like education, housing, and equal pay. And, I think it's really important as women, it's not enough to be equal. It's like we have generations of inequities that have been going on, especially for pay. And so when I think of what I've done, what I've focused on is many women are caregivers of the primary caregivers of their children. And frequently it's a woman at the head of a single parent household. And given the fact that they're shouldering more caregiving responsibilities, they get paid often less than men, even if they're in the same industry. And they often work in industries that pay lower salaries. They don't always get the child support they need, all those kind of things. All these factors mean that many women and their children are more likely to be in poverty. And so the bill, I had 2 bills that passed last year that focused on helping lift people out of poverty. One of them focused on helping people who are struggling to make ends meet pay less on their utility bills. Through both on affordable housing developments, but also for single residences. So it's not only paying less on the utility bills, but really weatherizing their homes and helping them get new furnaces and water heaters and things like that. So to me, it's going after those generational inequities that I think will help lift women up. And I'm continuing to do stuff this session too, but I'll let the others talk.
Okay, so
yes, I think it might be next. And I really appreciate the structure you gave us. It makes things flow. So thank you for being so organized. Women are good at that, aren't we? So I'm so glad you asked this question. It's really one of the main reasons why I ran for office. I'm very, very proud of a bill I did last session, Senate Bill 199. The title is Breaking Barriers, Removing Barriers. That's actually the title, Removing Barriers. The bill was designed to repeal two very discriminatory bills that were passed in 2006, and they were discriminating against undocumented residents of Colorado. So we had a situation where if you were undocumented and you went to get a library card, you could not do it because the form that you would have to fill out would show that you do not have citizenship. Well, what many Coloradans didn't know is that bill was being that form that we were all filling out was everywhere. It was for car sales. It was for business licenses. If you're a DACA student in nursing school or pharmacy school, and you went to apply to get your nursing license or your pharmacy license, even though you had just gone to school here in Colorado, you would be denied being able to apply for a professional license. If you wanted to start a childcare center, if you wanted to start a business and you went to apply for a county business license, you had to fill out that form and you would be denied. The administrative burden of that bill was really harmful to counties and cities, but think of the impact to all of our undocumented workers in COVID, when we needed people to be working, we needed childcare, we needed all of these services. So it was an uphill battle. I will tell you, we have the 3 chambers. 2 out of the 3 were ready to go. 1 chamber was not quite ready. There was a lot of work involved in making that happen. So I'm very, very proud that we were able to pass that bill. And if I have a minute more, I'm timing myself. I do. I'm going to share with you a bill that's running this session. It is we're calling it the period poverty bill, the tampon tax bill, the pink tax. It is a bill to remove the sales tax on period products because, as we all know, as women, these products are medical necessities to women. And as a pharmacist, I would see men coming in to get erectile dysfunction drugs or other drugs, no taxes on that. But as women, you have to have those products, and the burden to low income communities, to women who are struggling to make ends meet is absurd. And 20 other states have already passed it. Thank you, Karen and Tracy. It's passed through the House, I believe, and somebody will correct me. I know it's heading towards the Senate. So we are just very proud to be running that this year, and I'm very proud to be the Senate sponsor of that.
Good. Karen?
Great. I'm going to tell you about 2 things too, because I just have to. So this session, and my Senate sponsor is Senator Jaquez Lewis. This session, I've been working on a bill that came out of some issues that were seen in the LGBTQ community during COVID. So this came from Marty Moore at Out Boulder County, where she noticed some vaccine hesitancy and inability to reach those in the LGBTQ community for vaccine access, but there was no way to really know how many and where everybody was, and how to kind of address those inequities in healthcare access. And so she brought forward a bill that we worked on. It just got through its first committee a week or 2 ago, that will ask the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to figure out how they are going to collect voluntary collection of data at a health provider's point of interaction with the patient, just like we all are used to those drop-down lists where you can self-identify as male or female, to have more options at the point of healthcare access, and then have that data in a disaggregated form to be able to drive public health decisions, find out where inequities exist. And it's really important that we build good, reliable data As we all know, good data can drive better outcomes for people, but first we have to figure out how to get the data. And along the way, not only the LGBTQ community, but communities with disability, race and ethnicity will also be included in that. So super excited about how we can break down some of those system barriers to healthcare. The other one was last year that was my really big signature bill was the Farm Workers Bill of Rights. We've had an overt bias in our country against those that work in the fields, that harvest our food, that bring us food ever since the National Labor Relations laws were passed over 85 years ago. These workers have been deliberately carved out of things that the rest of us almost take for granted: overtime protections, workplace meal and rest breaks, access to key service providers, being able to bank and have your faith providers get to you, or healthcare providers. This was a huge battle in the Senate and in the House last year, and we actually got it through the day before we adjourned for that session. And we are a leader in our state for having passed many of the provisions in this bill, and other states around us are going to have to step up so that we stay not only competitive in the workforce, in the agricultural workforce, but also respect these workers for what they have done for us and our neighbors and our grocery stores for so many years. So super proud of that. It needs to be done on a national level, but we couldn't wait any longer for Congress to act. And so super proud of that one.
Good. Why do you feel it is so important for women to have representatives like all of you at the table to introduce and support legislation? And if your perspective weren't present, how do you think the outcome would be different? Sonia, you get to start.
Thank you. So important for us to be at the table because women's stories are powerful. And if we are presenting the stories and we're at the decision table, as Karen mentioned, she passed the Farm Workers Bill. Most of the work of that bill, in my opinion, was done behind the scenes. It was those personal, powerful discussions amongst ourselves where you change minds. Interestingly enough, I'll give you a little insight into what happens year to year. This year, you're not going to see as many of those transformative bills like we had last year. And the simple reason is because it's an election year and folks are so busy thinking about running for office, getting reelected, looking at other positions. We are not having some of those in-person small discussions with each other like we did last year. I could never this year have passed the prescription drug bill that is now the historic national standard for reducing prescription drugs. We could have never passed the insulin bill even this year. Look, we can't even get it in the bill in DC. It's because you have distractions from what really we need to be working on, unfortunately. Let me give you another story about why women being present and what we can do and being the representatives. I was running a gun violence prevention bill in 2020 that was going nowhere, and then COVID hit and leadership absolutely stopped it. So I brought it up again last year. Well, of course, we had a situation happen where a woman was murdered, whereas if the bill had been in place, there's a good chance her death could have been avoided. Her mother's testimony, her mother, her grandmother, her family testifying in front of majority of women in the House and a good majority of women in the Senate, sharing that story, feeling that story, we passed that bill. We passed that bill, the governor signed it. I just think that when we're at the table behind the scenes having those conversations, it makes all the difference in the world. It's not to say that giving testimony isn't important. You need all of it.
Hey, Karen.
All right, I'm up. Sonia touched on this. Yeah, women, identifying women are over half the population, and it's so important that we are equally represented to the amount that we participate in the population. And it is really crucial for us to be there to break down some of the outdated laws that were put in place when we weren't part of the conversation. And so, to your question of how outcome may have been different, just look at the past 200 years, that's how things were different. And now we are becoming more and more part of that conversation. The other thing is men and women, I'm not gonna stereotype, but just the way of our makeup and the way our brains work, we tend to problem solve differently. We tend to look at, we just look at life differently, and we try to figure out ways to make things better in a different way. And so it's important that we have both men and women at the table in making these decisions. And through those shared conversations, we might get to a much better outcome, a much better solution to the problem that's in front of us when we have those combined voices. Without our shared life experiences, without our ability to see disparities from somebody else's eyes, we won't be able to find the best way to address those things. And so that perspective, and again, it's up to us to listen to the men that we work with and try to understand where they're coming from, and with respect, and expect the same thing back when we share our shared experiences. There's, a lot of the gender equity issues that we address, the housing act, affordability and accessibility, many things that have to do with family, mental health disparities that are part of, historically, so many women have been the caregivers and the ones raising the kids. And so some of these issues just rise to the top for us because we're sometimes closer to the issue. And so I'm excited that we have a majority women legislature. And, I look forward to hopefully holding on to that so that we're at least 50%, if not a little bit more, because it's time. And, I just really appreciate being part of this process and being able to share my life experience. I do have a kid that my eldest identifies as a trans non-binary person. And so I share that as a mom, and I educate people one-on-one all day long about that. And it's just important that you're not afraid to share stories with each other and not let other folks perhaps drown out your ability to share.
And, for me, I think women bring to light different issues. Sonia, I think you talked about taxes on hygiene products. Diapers. That's another thing that came up. That having access to diapers, reproductive rights, and affordable housing, education. These are things that are near and dear to women because we are usually the ones faced with those issues. I think it's also, women tend to be more like planners, more collaborators, a little bit less risk averse. And so, and really in it for the long run, and we really value personal relationships. So it doesn't say that the way men do things is bad. We just do things differently. And I think that having those combined, you get a better outcome. For me, I think it's just really important for the next generations to see women leaders And I'm so proud that we do have the majority here in the state capitol. For me personally, I think it's really important to lift up women who are in technology, who are scientists, who are engineers. And so this is an area that's particularly important to me. I'm going to be speaking to a conference on girls in cybersecurity and next month, and I think it's just really important to lift up their voices, but also realize that women in technical environments can also be politicians too, because we also bring a different perspective. So yeah, that's kind of it.
Okay. So today we're celebrating International Women's Day. What is a key milestone or change you feel we should be celebrating related to creating a more equitable and just world for women? Karen, do you want to start?
Sure. You know, there are several things that come to mind when I think about this, and I've thought about it throughout the day, because we at the state capitol, we dressed in purple or red today, and we all got together and got our picture taken, and we had a moment on the floor where we were all at the microphone celebrating. So I was thinking about that as a milestone, just experiencing the moment. But also last month, I'm losing track of time, but when we watched President Biden give his State of the Union address, and sitting there at the beginning, I really teared up seeing Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Harris behind him on the podium. I just thought, wow, look at that. And every time something like that comes to mind, I just want to capture the moment and just soak it in. So we should be celebrating that like all the time. The other thing that I want to celebrate, I hope I can go on a little bit longer, is thanks, Darcy, I see you shaking your head. And this really hurts my heart. The women of Ukraine and their strength and holding their kids, pushing strollers, trying to get their families to safety. I mean, I'll tell you, those are strong women. Can you imagine if that was happening here in our country? It just really, it really hurts. But also I see them and I think, you know what? That's what women do. We do what we have to do, and we get it done. And they are all holding it together the best they can, you know, in gyms and aerobic studios and basements and parking lots, and like they're just doing the best they can. And they are a model for the entire world right now, leaving their husbands and brothers and everybody else behind. I mean, I just can't even imagine. The other thing I want you all to know is something we can celebrate, and is that we will be spending probably 14 hours in committee tomorrow to codify reproductive health care rights here in our state. Another huge concern, we're seeing state after state put up barriers to women and people that have the ability to have kids, even if they don't identify as women, to be able to have those healthcare decisions about their reproductive systems stay between them and their doctor. So we're going to be hearing a bill that will ensure that Coloradans will maintain that ability in our state law, no matter what happens at the federal level. And this is one of the big reasons why I ran for office. And I will be glad to sit there as long as it takes and listen to as much awful vitriol that comes at us as necessary to make sure that we get that law passed. And I know that My fellow legislators on this call are 110% behind me on that one. So we need to celebrate that today, tomorrow, and forever.
Well, Karen was so eloquent. She took all my points. Those were the same ones. What do I have to add? It was tomorrow. We have to celebrate Karen getting through that committee, and absolutely we will be voting when it passes through committee.
Send cookies.
Yeah, Reproductive Health Equity Act, House Bill 22-1279. Yes, that will be huge. But it's also, again, what you said about the women of Ukraine, and also the people who are helping, at the border. Look at how many people have come and helped all those folk as soon as they cross over the border. They're coming out of that. And I think too that, my district includes the Marshall Fire, same kind of things. I just have to say that I just am absolutely amazed at the outpouring of love and support and help that has continued to help Marshall Fire victims. And it will continue because, I think so many women are in it for the long run. So kudos, Karen, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm the last, hopefully not least. Yes, thank you so much, Karen, for talking about the situation in Ukraine. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I guess I really should. I've been lucky enough to, in my career as an international speaker, I traveled to Bulgaria, which has been to war with Russia, and I've traveled to Finland, which has been to war with Russia 27 times. And the two things that I noticed most about those countries when you go there is women are doing the jobs that traditionally you see men doing here. So when I went to Finland, the women were driving all the taxis, they were driving all the buses, they were running businesses that, we don't see as much. And I finally asked a woman who spoke English, I said, why is this? And she said, because when you go to war, that many times you have an aggressor, that many times women run the country because the men are off fighting. And that, while is not the case in Ukraine now, because women are leaving, women are still organizing behind the scenes. I saw it today. Women are organizing and getting the supplies to help them fight against this aggression. But back to your question, we are celebrating International Women's Day. The key milestone that I'm really, really so proud of is having Kamala Harris as vice president. And hopefully we will have a woman president, at least in my lifetime. A milestone that happened that I was a part of, I really was asked to run it. They told me it'll never pass. So as legislators, we get 5 bills. They said, you'll be giving up one of your 5 bills, but will you run it? And it was to give reproductive rights to undocumented women. We had to create a program. It was Senate Bill 9 that I was the Senate sponsor on by myself, which was quite the task. And now Medicaid pays for a year of contraceptive for all Medicaid women and families. And we set up within Medicaid a program to pay for reproductive services for undocumented women and families in Colorado. It starts this summer, and it can't get here soon enough because, as you know, if women don't have choice in reproduction, they can't work, they can't help their families, they can't get educations. So that is a milestone I will never forget. I still to this day can't believe we got that bill passed. It was voted the #1 bill in my Senate caucus last year, and we did it. We got it passed because it needed to be done. And if I have 1 minute more, since this is the last question, I'd like to ask everybody to take a moment and do something. As we know, the theme for this year is break the bias, but do you know what the symbol is? Does everybody know? It is this symbol. It's the symbol of the crossed arms. And I'm not sure why they picked this. I'm hoping somebody will take a picture of this because it's so impressive if we all do it. I believe it has to do, sorry, let me get my angle right. I believe it has to do with the X chromosome. I also believe that it has to do, I'm a scientist by nature. I also believe that it has to do with power. This is a powerful symbol, break. I also believe that it has to do with strength because you've got strength where our arms are crossed. So I'd love if we have a moment, other thoughts on this, but thank you so much for doing this because I was so happy when I saw this was their symbol for today.
What is that movie that this was in?
No, it's the theme. It's the
No, but
theme.
I mean, what was the name of that movie that the
Oh, well,
somebody-
somebody told me this was in what was it, the Kathy Bates thing where was it Tawanda?
yeah,
And
but
she was yeah, I don't know. I saw the film many times, but I don't know. I just loved the fact of, and we did it today on the Senate floor. I asked all the women senators to do this. Not
It
all of
didn't-
them did
yeah.
it, but
it didn't make it to the house. We didn't do it
Yeah.
in the house.
Thank you for sharing that with me. I love powerful moments like that.
So that concludes the portion where you all had advance notice of the questions that we asked you. And now we're going to open it up to the questions that have been coming into the chat. So Darcy's going to ask you the questions that you have to just field right at this moment. Darcy?
Hello, everybody. I'm Darcy Juday, and I'm the Public Policy Chair for AAUW. And I'd like to invite you to put your questions in chat. And if you're having trouble finding the chat button, drag your mouse down to the bottom of your screen. And when you get your cursor to the bottom of the screen, the chat button will show up. And I first, as Public Policy Chair, wanted to say to Karen and to the rest of you, hooray for House Bill 1279. You are probably aware that as a group, we put together a list of bills that we would like to actively support, and House Bill 1279 is at the top of AAUW's support list, and it's also at the top of many of a majority of the groups who are in Woco Boco have that as their top concern. So we're really pleased to see that that is in committee and going to be talked about tomorrow. So for my first question, this is from Kathy Hall of AAUW. Do you think there are state laws that still need to be addressed to reduce racism in Colorado? And how can we help make those changes happen? And why don't you just chime in as you wish?
Well, I'll just start with, I think there are. I think especially about the kid to prison pipeline, inequities in schools. And I think we still need a lot of reform in the way we react to potential crime situations or situations where there may be somebody who's mentally ill, and there's a race factor to that. And so I know that many of our colleagues are really chipping away at that. We have some wonderful colleagues that really understand and know this this area of concern, I should say. And so there's bills every single, I mean, last year and this year, there's bills all the time that are chipping away at these things.
There is going to be a bill coming soon. We just heard a little bit about it today to address some of the racism that's kind of built into our criminal justice system, about super low level offenses that do not warrant having somebody put in jail. Once you put somebody in jail, they might be there for 4 hours or 48 hours, but sometimes that's enough for them to lose their Medicaid benefits, to have issues at their job. And then they have to kind of start all over again. And so looking at some of those really low level offenses that don't create any issue with public safety, to have those offenses identified and taken off like automatic arrest and go to a different system of getting people where they need to be to show up to court, or perhaps they do need to get to mental health care. So that one is coming this session. So I don't have a number, I don't have a draft or anything for you, but that's, again, like Representative Burnett said, every little spot that we can find. And I have learned, being a relatively new legislator, that it is hard to do really big things, that you do end up having to do slices at things. And that can be frustrating, but that's how our government works. And so be looking for that one.
Can I add a little bit more? Well, Sonia to talk, and then I'd like to add a little bit more.
Oh, okay, great. Don't lose your thought, Tracy.
I have it written down.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I'm going to do a pitch first, because if you're taking stands on bills, I hope you'll get behind the eliminating the tampon tax and eliminating period poverty. We really need support on that, and I would appreciate it, especially when it comes to the Senate, because I'll be working on that. There are a couple of bills that have, and Karen touched on it. When I was in my first year as a House rep, we reduced the cash bail for certain crimes, because folks were being thrown in jail because they didn't have cash for bail. There are still combinations of if you're charged with double crime, but yet none of them are really posing any kind of threat to humans. It might be something with property or speeding, or maybe your car wasn't properly registered. If you do a combination of those things, we had to take that out of the bill. And I would like to see us do a renewed effort, because why are people sitting in jail for something like that? It's absurd. As Karen mentioned, they lose their job. They definitely can lose their Medicaid. They can lose all kinds of rights and opportunities. So, and then I'd like to revisit, while I was able to remove 2 of those discriminatory bills from the 2006 special session on immigrants, there's still 8 others that are still out there. And I would like to revisit them. They were all discriminatory. All 10 were discriminatory towards undocumented residents. And there's one that precludes undocumented residents from receiving certain grants and opportunities around education. I'd like to go, before I leave the Senate, if we can do something about that, that would be great. So there's many things we can do that can reduce racism and reduce discrimination. And I can guarantee you, the 3 of us here, we're going to work on those as long as we can, maybe even after we're legislators.
So, yeah, I'm an environmentalist. And so what I really focus on are environmental justice. And this intersects exactly with racism. We talk in all my bills all my environmental bills last year had an equity focus to it. And this year I'm taking, I don't know, I'm crazy, but I'm taking on 3 really big bills. The biggest one is addressing our horrific ozone air quality problem that we have here. We have some of the worst ozone in the world, and it's particularly bad in communities of color because they're located in places that are also high traffic and high industry. And so I'm taking this full on. It's a huge, I mean, it's huge, let me tell you, and you'll be hearing about it soon. I've been doing so much work on it behind the scenes, and it's going to come out in the near future. But it's addressing, getting fixing our ozone problem that we have here, but also giving communities, especially communities of color who are usually disproportionately impacted, a voice in terms of if there is, a new polluter coming to their community, that they have a bigger voice. If there's more air quality monitoring, there are, all those kind of things. So that's one of my big bills. Another big bill I'm doing has to do with improving the resiliency of our electric grid. And, usually you think about resiliency, you think about wildfires and, a transmission line being cut up. But there's also things, I call it reliability. And that's just the regular old, can you keep the lights on most of the time? And I found this really saddening. I was talking to a woman of color the other week. She lives in Denver, and she said, our electricity goes off all the time. I'm like, wait a minute. This is not out in the wildfires. This is not out in the boonies. This is right in the center of Denver. This has to be fixed. And so my bill is, it could help with right in Denver, in that disproportionately impacted community. My other really big bill, I think I'm crazy this year, but my other really big bill has to do with improving, greening up our building sector. And you think, well, what the heck does that matter? Well, for women, and especially for people who are of color, the indoor air quality associated with burning gas in your house, they're finding if you boil a cup of water on the stove, it would not be allowed by the Environmental Protection Agency if it were outside. And especially people who have older appliances, leaky appliances, this is really becoming an issue. So I'll quit talking, but those are, you get me going on these bills, I get really excited.
Thank you for that. We really applaud all of you for all the hard work you're putting in. And I do want you to know that eliminating period poverty is another bill that's at the top of all of our lists.
Right.
On a lighter note, Pip Bodkin says that Fried Green Tomatoes is the movie that Tawanda is in.
That's it.
That's right. And we had a question on how best to contact you. And I invite everybody to scroll up to the top of the chat to look at the links there. But I've only put emails in. So if you legislators would prefer to be contacted some other way, why don't you put that in the chat? So now I've got a question from Peggy Leach, who is the public policy chair of WOCO BOCO, and she's also a League of Women Voters member. And she's asking, what is most important to you? How do you decide how to vote on various bills? Is it debate in committees and on the floor? Or is it hearing from your constituents and their input? Which way do you lean on that? Or is there something else?
I'll go first on this one, I guess. I love that question whenever we get it, because it's usually, I'm going to answer it, I'll be an N of one, I mean, we all kind of make our decisions based on individual decision-making processes. But for me, when you run for office, one of the things that you learn is what are folks interested in your district? And that really taught me a lot, knocking on hundreds of doors and meeting with hundreds of people when you run. And what I found is, I think one of the reasons why I was elected is because I have the same values as Senate District 17. I have a lot of the same beliefs. Now, I'm not always sure. And so I have kind of a Sonia's kitchen cabinet, where if it's an issue about sustainable energy, I have about 5-6 people I will call up and I'll say, hey, I've got to make a decision here. What do you think? It's also a matter of constituent response to me. And that's something you said, how's the best way to communicate with us? Contact your senator and your House rep. Yes, it's nice to send the emails and the phone calls to other people, but I'll be very honest with you. I think it's consistent, and Karen and Tracy can chime in, but I don't have time to answer other folks really when they're outside Senate District 17. We get hundreds of emails in a week. And so what I do is I really listen, I watch the emails, we decide if they're constituent from Senate District 17, and those are the folks I pay attention to. So do we talk with the expert leaders in the Senate? For me, yeah, sure, absolutely. There's 2 senators that are really great on energy issues. I go to them. People come to me all the time on healthcare bills, all the time, because I know, I'm a licensed pharmacist and practiced in healthcare. So that's how I do it. What do you think, Karen, Tracy?
Yeah, I'm still learning as I go, but the bills that I'm carrying come to me in various forms, sometimes from constituent ideas, and sometimes from groups that are working towards things that the people of Longmont care about, like Sonia said. When it's someone else's bill and I have to listen to it in committee, I read the bill for one, especially when it comes to my committee. I read the bill and make sure I talk with the sponsor of the bill and find out who's supporting their bill, who's opposed to their bill, and why on both sides of that, to try to find out how is this, what is the problem we're trying to solve? How is this the best way to solve that problem? And are we hurting anyone along the way as we try to solve this problem? And so that's how I try to formulate how I'm going to vote in committee. Once it comes to the House floor for the debate of the whole House, and I didn't hear it in committee, it was in somebody else's committee, there I have to sometimes rely on those committee members if they were able to decide. And since we are a majority as far as the Democratic Party right now, if the committee that heard it passed it through committee, then there's a pretty good chance that the kinks were worked out and there was consensus enough to get it through committee, because bills that don't meet kind of that bar get voted down in committee and the rest of us never hear them. So that helps in the decision-making process. We're kind of sharing the load in making sure that bills that come to the House floor at least we're able to pass through committee. And then if it's complicated again, I will go to the sponsor, and we're kind of taught, like, if you have a concern with a fellow caucus member's bill, to please go talk to them directly, find out if there's any way to amend the bill to address your problems. You don't have to just take it. You can work with them and try to come up with some solutions that can still make the bill better. And so there's, and also I depending on the issue, I will check with our city council. We have someone from city council that'll let us know if they're taking a stand on a particular bill. Check with the Longmont Chamber of Commerce. I check with the St. Vrain Valley School District on bills, because it's really important that I continue to represent the district. And so those collective voices matter to me.
And I'd have to say that's a pretty good complete list here. I would add that testimony in committee, especially if it's somebody who is an expert in that area. What I do is in the bills that I hear, obviously I read them, I talk them over with my colleagues before sitting in committee, and come armed with questions to ask not only the bill sponsor, but also the other people who are testifying, because sometimes you'll get more information there. I also, if the bill is not in any of my committees and it gets out of committees and gets to the floor, I'll listen to the arguments. I also look at what the committee vote was. Was it unanimous? That's a pretty good sign. But if it's one that's divided, knowing like who voted against it, who voted for it, is also important. I have my own set of phone home people that I count on, that if I'm unsure about something, I certainly call them. And of course, in Longmont City Council and others, people in Boulder County as well. So yeah, that's kind of it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And I'd have to also echo what Senator Hawkes Lewis said. You know, I think a lot of it is I got voted in because of the values that I shared with voters. And so that's core to the way I vote too.
Thank you very much. I have one last question for you all. And this question is from Linda Davies, who's an AAUW member, and I'm going to add to it a little. There are a number of really interesting bills that haven't been introduced yet. One of them is the Power Bill, protecting opportunities and workers' rights, that would improve protections against sexual harassment and extend the filing time frame. Another one is the Workplace Age Discrimination Act. And then there's an anti-human trafficking bill as well. And these are all very important, but we also know that it's an election year. And as you've said, everybody's pretty busy. So Linda wants to know, what bills do you feel will have the most promotion and the most deserved attention in the coming legislative year? Can you make predictions?
Sure. Yeah. Do y'all mind if I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So first, I'm going to ask y'all a question real quick. How many of you attend either our town halls or other town halls of elected officials? It could be county commission, city, us. Just let me see some show of hands. How many people? Okay, great. I would love it if more of you attend, and here's why. Because we go over our bills and we tell you on those town halls which ones are going to be really tough to pass and what else is going on. And there are 4 big topics that all of us are going to tackle this session because we have to. The money's coming in from the federal government, the ARPA funds, the American Recovery Plan Act. Did I get that right, y'all?
American Rescue.
American
Rescue.
Recovery,
American Rescue
Plan. Thank you, Karen. Sorry, I didn't have it in front of me. Those monies, it's a huge amount of money. It's in the billions. We set aside some of it. We got out there quickly. Some of it we set aside. And there's 4 main areas that we established work groups in: affordable housing, mental health, behavioral health, workforce and job, and educational attainment. Those 4 areas, you are definitely going to see bills in those 4 areas. And I can almost guarantee you the 3 of us are going to be at least on one of those bills, because they're broken into all kinds of components. Affordable housing is pretty much on the top of everyone's list. And we have, I believe it's $400 million. The reason why I brought up the town halls is we actually went into the very specifics of how some of this money might be spent. And then it gives you a basis for getting behind some of the bills with us. Because, and I'll just be very frank here, that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they would rather take all the money and just put it into what I would say business concerns, and not look at some of our underlying public safety, dealing with homelessness, dealing with childcare. And the 3 of us, we're on the same side of the aisle, and so the same party, and we have a commitment to those 4 issues. And so when you see those bills coming out, I hope you'll support them. And I think that this could be a very important year if we can get some of those passed.
Yeah, and they're just about to be announced soon. The bills themselves haven't been written, but there are certain kind of buckets of money, and this is one-time funds, and that's why we have taken a tremendous amount of effort to determine how do you best spend one-time funds to enact transformative changes, transformational changes in these areas to allow those changes to build on the future, because we won't have the money to keep spending the same amount every year. And so putting funds into grant programs or revolving loans that can keep living on into the future. There's going to be a $200 million bucket of money specifically to address homelessness that will be coming out. It sounds like a lot of money, but in reality, it's not. So how best where best to put that money and how best to spend it. So those, we're almost halfway through the session. So we're going to have to start getting those out and the bills drafted and get the ball rolling on all of that soon. This Reproductive Health Care Act is a big one, though. I think that's going to be one of the signature bills of this session. So spread the word on that. Also, Sonia said about the town halls. I think those are recorded. So even if you missed it, you can go find it and fast forward through some of it and listen again.
Yeah, I'd have to say that these bills, these transformational bills, these ideas were things that the legislature started working on in off-session committees last summer. So there's been a tremendous amount of thought that has been put into doing transformational change in these buckets. And so yes, keep that in mind. I'd also have to say that air quality is another one. This is one of the high priority items for the governor in many different air quality investments. And, my bill should be part of that. Several of my bills should be part of that. So I think that's another area to look out for.
Well, thank you all very much for your insights and for your advice and for your encouragement. And I'm going to turn it back over to Bev right now for some closing remarks.
Okay. You've all had access to see the legislators' emails. Please use those and contact them with questions and your thoughts on items. Thank you, Sonia, Karen, and Tracy, for giving us your time tonight. And not just tonight, obviously you guys thought about what the questions were and did some prep work. And thank you to everyone who attended. We appreciate you taking part in this. So good night to everybody.
Stay well, stay healthy.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.